Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Hayden Newberry Fishing. Today we're back in a camper again making a video. I've made a lot of these talking videos and stuff in the back of my fifth wheel back when I was in South Carolina, like almost a year ago now. And since I sold that one, I haven't made a whole lot of these, just sit down, talk to the camera, and talk about stuff. But we got a 1989 Ford Jamboree now that I'm traveling in. I had sold my fifth wheel, was traveling out of my truck for a while, which you guys saw some videos of that way back. And now I'm in this. This is actually a curtain going to the cab. I finally got kind of a setup in here that I feel like I can use to make some videos, do my YouTube research for some videos, which I'm actually about to do a deep dive into some stuff from the Elite Series tournaments this year, some videos that I told you guys I was going to make up. So we're going to do those. We're going to get to that. I appreciate you guys that have kept following along with the videos this entire year because I've been working on my house, working on my boat, not on the water near as much as I had. I just had a baby. So this year I didn't do major tournaments, which if you follow the video, you've seen that. And next year we're going to get back into everything. This fall we're going to be posting a lot more on the water videos. I've actually just switched boats. I'm in the process of putting all my new electronics and everything and rigging my nitro that I just bought, and I'm selling my old boat. So just a lot of stuff going on, and hoping that I'll be back on the water here soon. But tonight's video is kind of a throwback to some of the ones that I made, the storytime videos. If you watch my videos back then, I had all the storytime videos, and I still, if you want to send in videos for me to tell on storytime, it's h.newberryfishing at gmail.com. You can send in your stories there. I did a couple of those like 6 months ago or something like that. But most fishermen, we just talk about fishing stories and stuff anyway, so it's fun to tell some on video. And I had one that I never told when I was doing all those, but I wanted to tell really bad because it's really, really relatable for any tournament bass fisherman out there, anybody that has dealt with full season just ups and downs and everything. And the first year that I ever did the BFLs, back when it was FLW that was there, that was, I don't know how many years ago, but I did the first year that I did the full 5 BFLs was for Kentucky Lake. So the whole season was just kind of a cool story that to me is pretty relatable. It might not be to some people, I don't know. But so it was one of the first years that Kentucky Lake really took a huge dive, and it was just horrible. The fishing wasn't good. The weights were down, and I wasn't familiar at all with the lake. I just kind of dove into fishing down there. Didn't really know much about it, and knew that I was going to fish all 5 of them, and I had to learn somehow. So where I think that it's more of a relatable subject for tournament fishermen, I didn't even really have as much of an opinion then, but now I know that that's the kind of the scenario that I like, is a tougher fishery. And you hear guys that fish major tournaments and stuff all the time that say, well, I'd rather it be a grinder than a slugfest. It's way easier for me to feel like I do well in a grinder than a slugfest. It's way easier to make a comeback in a grinder than a slugfest. And that entire season rung true to that. And it's well, I'll tell you the story and you'll understand more so why that's said and what the, I guess, the premise is behind it. So to start out the season, I go out really now knowing that I knew nothing about Kentucky Lake, but feeling like I was going to do awesome. Go out there and start out the day with like a 2-pounder and a 3-pounder, and felt pretty good about it, and then just went dead and ended up catching a small one later on in the day. Thought that I had just bombed my first ever BFL, which I was like a little devastated on the water, but just happy that I like got one in the books. And go back to weigh in, and there's nobody in line. The bag line is like 2 people maybe, and in a big tournament like that, generally you expect like people lined up both sides of the tanks. Everybody just killed them. Go up there, weigh in my, I think it was like 7.5 pounds or something like that, maybe I don't know, it wasn't much. And they tell me I'm in like, I think I was in like 12th place or something, which was huge to me. And being a kid that had never fished a tournament like that, and turned out I got, I think it was like 32nd place out of 190 boats or something. Awesome to me. My big goal for the first season that I was fishing the BFLs was to make regionals. They take the top 45 to regionals down at Chickamauga, which was actually a lake that I had cut a check in a big bass tournament a few years prior to that. So I was like, oh, sweet. If I go to regionals, I can make it there, and I actually kind of know that lake a little bit. So on to the next tournament. I'm on this high of like, hey, I know what I'm doing. I can maybe compete with these people, and maybe I can actually do well in tournaments. Period, because I didn't know if I was going to go there and just get killed and go back home with my tail tucked between my legs. But I go to the next tournament. Next tournament, there's a blizzard. I was planning on running down. If you're familiar with Kentucky Lake, I was planning on running down like 80 miles south as far as I could down to the New Johnsonville area. And there's a blizzard hits, and like I say a blizzard for Kentucky. It was a huge snowstorm, and it gives us we had a snow delay. The snow was so thick that they didn't allow us to take off. We were all shoveling snow off our front decks with our measuring boards, sitting there waiting on takeoff to happen, and all it is just a white wall outside of Moore's Marina. So it ends up being like 9 o'clock in the morning before we can take off. So then, and the weather's bad, the wind's up and everything. So I'm sitting there trying to decide if I'm gonna run or try to run down there, which I'd never, I'm new to big tournaments. I'd never made a run like that. I'd never even thought about making a run like that, let alone in bad conditions on Kentucky lakes, which isn't smart. So I run to an area that's kind of close real quick, and at that point I had a Minn Kota Tarova. If you're not familiar with them, they're a unit that it doesn't fold out like a traditional trolling motor. It slides out through the hub, so when it slides out, it then extends up and goes down in the water. So I go over, fish spot, said, all right, screw it. We're going to run down there even if I only have like 2 hours of fishing time or something, maybe less or whatever. I'm running down there. I'm going to see if I can make it. I make it down maybe 20 miles down the lake, and I hit a huge wave. My trolling motor hit a huge wave, and I'm moving about 60 miles an hour. My trolling motor deploys, snaps. And this is the new Minn Kota unbreakable shaft. So it didn't break, it just splintered and was just, flopping. So I'm out in the middle of Kentucky Lake in this just rollers. I go up, and the only way to get the trolling motor up because of the design of it was to slide it up, which you couldn't because it was splintered. So I had to take the trolling motor off so that I could move again. So I take the trolling motor off, which was a ordeal in itself. My co-angler is sitting behind me with a rope tied to the trolling motor, so when I finally get it off, it doesn't just fall off to the bottom of the lake. I'm laying on the front deck getting seasick because I'm going 4 feet up in the air and then slamming down, and 4 feet up in the air and slamming down. And on top of it, it's ice cold outside because it's like, the snow had just stopped after a snowstorm. So all in all, I put the trolling motor back in the boat. All I can do is drift fish. I kind of pick some new water out, realizing that it's just, I'm not going to, after all this, it's almost noon. I'm not going to make it down the lake. So I picked a spot out where I was, started drift fishing, actually ended up drifting and catching probably, I think it was like 4 or 5 unders, but all of them were like just an inch short and didn't have anything to weigh in. So I zeroed just horribly in my second tournament. Come back, went back in with a broken trolling motor sitting in between my seats and no fish. So second BFL I zero. So this is where we're getting into the grinders are leave it open for a comeback. So because Kentucky Lake was so rough and almost like 50% of the field was zeroing every tournament because the fishing was so bad, I actually still had a chance. I was like, I can afford a zero this season. If the fishing is this bad, I can still make the top 45 with a zero. So At that point, I've fallen in the standings, but I'm not that far down. Tournament 3 comes around. There's 5 tournaments in a season. Tournament 3 comes around. I have found some giants out on the ledges. It's early summer on Kentucky Lake. I'm confident now. I've spent all this time idling around Kentucky Lake looking for these offshore schools, and I've just luckily somehow found a few of them. I go out on tournament day with, and here's where the knowledge thing comes in. A lot of times weekends on lakes like that, they change the lock scheduling and the dam and how much water they're going to let through and the timing and everything, which I did not know anything about. All I knew was that I was finding these offshore fish. So I go out on tournament day and I lose a big one in the morning, then don't get a bite for forever. I go run a couple more spots. I had found some like really shallow fish and stuff and ended up again catching a few unders. Come back in and just had a horrible day. Like straight, I didn't have any excuses the second time. I just zeroed twice. So I went from this high of the first tournament ever. I'm like, I can hang with these people. To the second one, I was like, oh, it's because I broke my trolling motor. That's why I zeroed. Then the third tournament, I come around thinking I'm gonna top 10 it, and I zero again. And at this point, I'm like, well, there goes regionals. I can't make regionals after zeroing twice. So I had a 32 and a 0-0, so I'm tied with like the bottom half of the field the second time. But again, the half of the field zeroing every tournament because the fishing was so tough kept me in the running a little bit. So going into the third tournament of the season, at this point I am now way down in the standings. Again, late summer, or late to midsummer, hot as could be in Kentucky, I find some brush piles and some offshore stuff that I feel like I can put together a decent bag on. And again, I still haven't I'm not like getting information or tips from anybody. I knew nobody that fished Kentucky Lake. I'm just going out there trying to learn it as I go. It was kind of a dumb way to do it, but it's a good way because when you learn something, you really learn it. You have learned every bad way to do it first. So I go out, tournament day, I end up running like 160 miles that day. I had found these fish back in like creeks and stuff that I thought I could do good with too. I actually ran to those first in the morning and took forever getting back in this creek. They weren't there. Went back in another creek. They weren't there. Went to some of my offshore stuff. Lost one good one by the boat, and then caught an under. Then I run like all the way back around to this other area. Felt like I spent half my day running around the lake. And like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I am about to leave. I tie on, and I remember it like it was yesterday because it's just like it's a kind of a big moment. And it's easy to remember when fish catches when this would be my 4th keeper caught the entire that season, and this is my 4th tournament of the season. That's how tough we're talking, and I'm still thinking I'm possibly in the running to make regionals. So I catch it was almost a 6-pounder. I think it was like maybe a 5'10" or a 5'12" or something like that. I was about to switch spots. I was like, I'm going to tie on a little bit lighter jig, throw it out there. Huge one. So stick it in the live well. That ends up being the only fish I catch that day. But it was only taking like 7 pounds to cut a check in these tournaments because the fishing was so tough. So I bring in a 5.5, 5 3/4 pounder, whatever. And I think I was in the top 30 or the top 20s. I think it might have been in the top 30s, whatever. Good finish with one fish. So at this point, I knew that I had to get, I can't remember how many points I had estimated that I had to get, but I had to move up, if I remember correctly, in the last tournament, I had to move up another 17 places to make 45th. So that would have put me, I had moved myself back up into the top 60s around there, or top 50 something. So At this point, I've caught 4 fish the entire season, and I still have a running at making the regional. Again, tells you how tough everything was. Going to the last tournament, again, it's a fall tournament. I actually had nothing going into this tournament, and I ended up catching some. Excuse me. Take a drink of water here. I'm talking too much. I end up running around a little bit, throwing a jerkbait and stuff. It's kind of a fall bite going on. Is a fall bite going on. Catch a bunch of unders, and I end up catching 2 keepers the entire day. I think I caught probably 30 or 40 fish. It was just crazy for how the season had gone. But 2 of them were actually keepers. I think I weighed in 4.5 pounds, and I moved up 17 places and finished 45th and went to regionals my first year in the BFLs. So, moral of the story is the why fishermen like grinders as opposed to slugfests, because if that had been an entire slugfest season, the day that I broke my trolling motor would have ruined the entire year. And that's an uncontrollable thing. It's like just a fluke. I mean, accident. I mean, it's so hard to control stuff like that happens. Things breaking and bad weather pushing in, just very hard to control. And sometimes you don't come out on top when situations like that happen. But in grinder events, you can lose that 5-pounder and still possibly make a top 10 after a couple days of fishing. So in like a, say a, these are 1-day events, 5 1-day events. Well, in a 4-day tournament in like the Elite Series, or a 3-day tournament in a Toyota and a Bassmaster Open, I can lose that 5-pounder on day 1 and recover. And when there's, say I need a 25-pound bag and you end up only weighing in, say you're on the St. Lawrence, I guess for an example, and you weigh in 18 pounds on day 1, you're probably not coming back. There's tournaments where you can have a great day and there's no coming back from it because it's a slugfest. But a grinder, it's like you can almost zero some days if it's really, really hard to catch them, and then just weigh a monster bag in the next day. It's like the one tournament last year in an open on Hartwell, I had a bad first day, and it was one of the just lakes like that. A lot of times with spotted bass, you can't do that. The weights are so solid. Actually, Cherokee is an even better example. The weights were so solid in that event that when I had a bad day on the first day, all I could hope for was maybe eking out a check. There was no chance, absolutely no chance, that I was going to weigh in 30 pounds on a lake where the best bag was 20. So the comeback margin just isn't there. Anyway, that's my story time story for the episode, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. There'll be more videos to come, probably more videos in this camper. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching.